Welcome to another wonderful Susannah Calloway audiobook. We are excited to have you with us. Before we begin the story, please like and subscribe to our channel and share it with friends. This allows us to continue adding free clean Western romance audiobooks for you to enjoy. The following title is copyrighted by Susannah Calloway, Western romance author. Now, find a comfortable spot, relax, and enjoy the story. The Bride Spoke to Horses. Chapter 1. Cara stared out at the scenery passing by at almost twice the speed of a galloping horse. She was not riding a horse, rather she rode on the train, the white man's means of traveling far distances. She had seen them before, but had never traveled on one until now. It was taking her further and further away from her people and the only home she had ever known. Beside her sat the old man who had rescued her from her people. Until he came into her life, Cara never knew she was a white woman. She knew her skin was a lighter color, but she'd never thought about it much. Never realized what it meant. Cara. The name the old man called her. Cara Warring. While it was a nice enough name, so was Wajika, the name given to her by her people, the Quapaw Indians. Though she remembered some of her native white man's language from her childhood, she understood more than she spoke. When the old man took her from the Quapaw, he told her her true name was Cara Warring. "These ain't your people," he told her. "They snatched you from your family when you was little. You is a white girl and you belong with white folks." She did not like him, this old man who smelled of chewing tobacco, sweat, and filth. Kevin Harding was his name, and she eyed him sidelong as he snored, his chin drooping to his chest while he slept, the rhythm of the train causing him to sway back and forth. She did not know why he made her come away from her people as she was happy and content with her tribe in Oklahoma. She might have resisted harder had not the chief of the Quapaw told her it was time for her to live among her own kind. "You must go with this white man, Wajika," he had said to her, not without kindness. "Find a white man for a husband, raise white children. We should have let you go back long ago." The train's whistle blew sharply, startling her out of her reverie and waking Kevin Harding. He snorted, blinking like an owl in the daylight, then glanced at her as though fearing she might have escaped his custody while he slept. "Coming into Sweetwater," he said. "This is where we get off." Sweetwater. The town he called my new home. Cara did not remember her birth parents. During the 5 days since she had been snatched from her tribe, she wondered why the man wasn't taking her to them rather than to this strange place. At least if he did that, then she might be more willing to adapt to the white man's world. As it was, he was taking her among strangers, when she could barely speak the language and did not understand their ways. She wore a pale lavender gown made of some sort of woven cloth. Kevin Harding had insisted she wear it, and he took away her beaded buckskin shirt and skirt. Hating herself for not fighting harder to wear them, she carried all her belongings in a wicker basket and kept them close to her out of fear he might take them as well. With Kevin Harding urging her from behind, Cara stepped off the hissing train, steam billowing from its tall stack. She halted in her tracks. A crowd of people stood on the wooden platform, staring at her. Some pointed, some talked with others nearby, while some laughed. Women watched with their heads covered in strange hats, clad in gowns similar to hers. Men also wore tall hats, many with beards and wearing coats and trousers. She knew they stared because she was different. She may be white but she was still different on the inside. She was a Quapaw Indian. "Move along," Kevin Harding hissed in her ear, giving her a small shove. "Other people are trying to get off." Only when she stepped out of the way and walked along the side of the train did she realize they did not stare at her at all. They continued to point, talk, and laugh even when she was out of their direct line of sight. Watching, Cara noticed other people getting off the train, too, and greeting those who had been waiting for it to arrive. Other people got on the train, and little by little the crowd dispersed, leaving her standing by Kevin Harding. "Mr. Harding?" Cara turned at the sound of the woman's voice. Kevin Harding also turned to face the two people walking toward them. A man and a woman, both of them older than she, but not nearly as old as Kevin Harding. They looked her up and down as though curious about her, and held out their hands to Kevin Harding. "Mr. and Mrs. Fitzgerald?" he asked. "Yes, I am Thomas Fitzgerald, the mayor of Sweetwater. This is my wife, Mary." Cara watched as they each clasped hands with Kevin Harding, and thought it a similar gesture as when two warriors met for the first time. Though how the woman could be a warrior baffled her. The strangers looked at Cara expectantly, as though waiting for something. "This is Cara Warring," Kevin Harding said. The woman stuck out her hand toward Cara. Cara eyed it in open puzzlement, glancing from Kevin Harding to the woman and back again. Kevin Harding picked up her right hand and placed it in that of the woman. "Shake hands when you meet a stranger," he said impatiently. The woman smiled. "I am Mary Fitzgerald, Cara. Mr. Harding has told us all about you, and we want to welcome you to our town of Sweetwater." The woman let Cara's hand go, and the gesture was repeated with the man. Cara didn't want Kevin Harding to touch her again, so she held her hand up for the mayor to take. "I am Thomas Fitzgerald," he said. "My wife also speaks for me. Welcome, Miss Warring." Kevin Harding bent to her ear again. "Say, thank you, Dot." Remembering how white people said that to one another on the train, Cara mimicked the words. Thank you. You do not speak much English, dear?" Mary Fitzgerald asked. As Cara shook her head, Kevin Harding leaned in. "She understands more than she says, Miss Fitzgerald. She don't talk much at all, for that matter." "Perhaps that will change with time," the woman said, kindness gazing out of her clear blue eyes. "Come, Cara. You may call me Mary. I have arranged for you to stay with Mrs. Bracken. She is getting old, and a widow, and is in need of help at her seamstress shop. She is offering you food and lodging, with a small salary for your work. I understood there was a reward for rescuing this here gal?" Kevin Harding said, as Mary took Cara by the arm to lead her off the platform. Mary did not turn back, but Cara heard her husband say, "You'll have to take that up with the sheriff, Mr. Harding. I know of no reward for her rescue." "Well, that's why I wrote to y'all," Kevin Harding said as they walked away, his voice plaintive. "'Cause of that reward money. At least Mary and her husband smell better than Kevin Harding." Cara walked with them, trying to ignore Kevin Harding's yells and complaints from behind them. She gazed around at the strangeness. Buildings made of wood lined the main dirt track that ran through the middle of the town. Over some of them were boards painted with odd markings, and one of them contained a picture of a rearing horse. When she would have stopped and stared at it in wonder, Mary urged her on. "You are such a pretty thing," Mary said to her as they walked, often waving to people passing by on foot, on horseback, or in wagons drawn by mules or horses. "Isn't she, Thomas?" "Yes, she is. That lustrous black hair," Mary went on. "One would almost think you were an Indian, Cara, with that long black hair of yours. Except your eyes are, what would you call their color, Thomas?" "Light brown?" "Almost gold," he replied. "Like new honey." "Stunning," Mary went on, her voice hushed. "I wouldn't be surprised if you were offered marriage proposals, Cara." Though she understood much of what was said, that last part escaped her. "What do they mean by that? What does it have to do with how pretty they think I am?" Among the Quapaw, Cara was considered plain. She was taller than most girls her age, her skin too pale, and her eyes, the younger members of the tribe often mocked her, calling her fish eyes. She was different from them, and they teased her about it. But still, she loved them. They were her people no matter their differences in appearance. Would these people in this tribe of Sweetwater also see her as so different from them? Though she expected it from every turn, no one pointed their fingers. None, so far, called her fish eyes. No one laughed at her, or called her ugly. Mary, in fact, called her pretty. "If they do not see me as different, does that mean I am one of them?" Mary stopped in front of a building near the end of the street, a building much like all the others with a board above it. More strange symbols abounded on it, and Cara wished she knew what they were. Mary opened the door to a tinkling sound. Staring up at the origin of the noise, she discovered a silver object that made noise whenever it moved. Reaching up, she moved it, making the sound again. It delighted her enough that she smiled for the first time in a very long while. "It's called a bell," Mary explained, smiling. "You have a lovely smile, Cara." "Bell," Cara repeated, making the bell jingle again. "I'm here," grumbled a voice. "Cease yanking on the darn thing, will you?" Cara glanced away from the bell to see an old, gray-haired woman emerge from the back, stooped and round-shouldered, a shawl over her shoulders. She peered at her visitors through spectacles on her nose, her mouth thinned in disapproval and likely a bitter nature. Cara disliked her on sight, and hoped that this was not the woman she was supposed to stay with. "Mrs. Bracken," Mary said with a broad smile, "this is Cara Warring, captured by the Quapaw Indians as a child. Cara, say hello to Mrs. Bracken." "Hello." Cara held out her hand the way Kevin Harding showed her. But Mrs. Bracken peered at it suspiciously, then turned away. "So, this is the orphan I am supposed to apprentice into my trade, then," she groused, making her way behind the counter. "She looks like a God-hating Injun, all right." "Mrs. Bracken," Mary said sternly, after exchanging a dismayed glance with her husband. "Cara is a white woman, recently freed from captivity. I don't care. Can she sew a neat stitch? If I am to put up with her, then she better be obedient and do what I tell her." "You will, won't you, Cara?" Cara nodded, understanding that this woman did not like her, would never like her, and meant to turn her into some kind of a slave. She knew how to sew clothing made of animal skins with hardened sinew, but in gazing around, she saw no skins. Only rolls of cloth, dresses or suits on imitation people made of wood. What was she to do with that? "Do you have a room for her?" Mary asked. "Yes, follow me." As Thomas remained behind with the imitation people, Mary urged Cara to follow the old woman. Mrs. Bracken led them to the back, past more rolls of cloth and wooden boxes stacked against the walls, to a small alcove off the storeroom. Only a curtain hung from the ceiling to give her privacy. The tiny room held a narrow cot, a washstand, and a small table and single chair. Nothing else. "She can sleep here," Mrs. Bracken stated firmly. "She can come upstairs to get her food, but she eats here. I do not want her roaming about my rooms over my store." Mary glanced about, her brow raised. "There is no stove to help keep her warm in the winter. That's what blankets are for. Do you want her to stay or not?" Cara watched Mary with no little anxiety, for she did not want to stay here with this bitter old woman. But Mary nodded. "Very well. Cara, stay here with Mrs. Bracken and do what she says, all right?" Cara nodded, wishing she knew how to ask to stay with Mary and her husband. She would work hard for them and earn her keep, if only they would let her. Mary seemed to read her thoughts, for she suddenly embraced Cara. "It will be all right," she whispered. Then Mary departed the house with her Thomas, leaving Cara behind to stare forlornly after them. Chapter 2. Unbeknownst to Cara, or the Fitzgeralds, more than one set of eyes had watched them walk past on the street. As with any small town, strangers in it tended to attract attention, and Cara was no exception. The men watched her with interest until she passed out of sight, then one of them whistled. "Who was that?" "You mean the mayor and his wife?" The first man offered his companion a withering glare, who chuckled. "Has marriage addled your wits, Holt?" he demanded. "I stare at only the prettiest of women, and Mary Fitzgerald is not all that stareable." "Stareable?" his companion asked. "That ain't a word." "It is now." Anson Holt shook his head. "You can't just make up words as you go along, Gunnar." "Why not? Isn't that how the language develops? Soon, if everyone starts using it, suddenly it's a proper word with a meaning and everything." "Did you want something?" Anson asked. "Or did you just come here to rattle my cage?" "I came here to ask you if you wanted to shoe some of my horses," Gunnar replied. "But if that is your attitude, I'll just take them along to the next town." Gunnar started to walk out of the vast blacksmith shop owned by the hugely impressive Anson Holt, who planted a huge hand on Gunnar's shoulder and spun him around as easily as he might turn a child of 5. You know darn well the smithy in the next town will charge you twice as much for half the quality of work. Gunnar grinned. Now, I like your attitude. Though he stood less than half the size of the hulking Anson, Gunnar Krick was a broad-shouldered man with the lean hips of a professional horseman. His shaggy red-blonde hair under his cowboy hat curled around his collar, and his mustache drooped to his chin. Lively blue eyes danced in his angular face, and he knew several women in the town, including Anson's wife, who thought him handsome. At the town dances, he never lacked a partner. He did, however, lack a suitable wife. So you don't know who that young woman is? He asked. Nope. Anson picked up a piece of straw from the floor and stuck it between his teeth, leaning against the barn door. Never saw her before. She was a petty thing. Yup. I guess. Did you even notice her? Anson stared down at him, his brow lifted. I was supposed to. Gunnar snorted. Too enthralled with your little wife, I expect. The curse of married men. Hey, I look at petty gals who ain't my wife, Anson protested. Just ain't many of them as petty as my wife is. Gunnar had to admit, scars on her face aside, Anson's wife Sarah was one hellacious beautiful woman. He also knew she was a former saloon girl who came to town on the heel of another ex-saloon girl, Maggie Reeves. He did not care about their backgrounds at all, for that was none of his business. But what interested him was that they were reputed to be mail-order brides. So, he asked, his tone cautious, how is married life for you? Anson's brow rose again. Now, why would you ask a question like that? Gunnar felt his face heat. Well, you know, Anson, Sarah and Maggie Reeves, they were, spit it out. Mail-order brides. Or some such. Gunnar glanced away, knowing that Anson studied his profile closely. He felt embarrassment for having asked, but his gut clenched upon hearing Anson's answer. Well, Maggie was, Anson said slowly. She and Thornton hit it off pretty well. She gave birth to a boy, did you know? No. I hadn't heard. Strong little tyke. Thornton is so proud, he struts around town like some Irish banty rooster. And Sarah? Well, Anson drawled, sucking on his straw. She was supposed to find a husband through the mail. I sort of took a shine to her before she had a chance, though. He stared hard at Gunnar. What's this all about? Gunnar tried a grin, which didn't work, as he stared out over the dusty street. Well, I sort of ordered myself a bride. Did you now? Yeah. I did. I was sort of wondering, you know, how well that kind of thing could work. I suppose it's different for everyone, Anson said. It worked well for the Reeves. I suppose there are a few marriages that didn't work out quite so well. That's the situation I'm afraid of, Gunnar admitted. Bring her 1,000 miles to marry me, and find she has buck teeth, crossed eyes, and the temper of a hellcat. My bed is itchy enough without that. Where is your bride coming from? Gunnar scratched the back of his neck. Dunno. Some town back east somewhere. I suppose if she came all this way and you don't much like her, Anson said, I reckon you can send her back. Nothing says you have to marry her once she's here. Isn't that rather crass? Anson laughed. Yep. The sound of footsteps approaching prevented Gunnar from uttering the searing comment that rose to his lips. Both men turned, and found Mrs. Holt walking toward them. Gunnar snatched off his hat and answered her welcoming smile. Mrs. Holt. Mr. Krick, how nice to see you. Is Anson badgering you again? Me? Gunnar chuckled. Why no, ma'am, not this time. Will you stay for supper, then? I made plenty. No, ma'am, I need to head on back to my ranch. I wanted to ask your husband if he'd shoe some horses for me, and dang if he didn't send me down the road to that cracker yonder. Anson? The big blacksmith glowered down at Gunnar. Funny, get me in trouble with my missus, will you? If I can, yes. Sarah laughed. He will shoe your horses for you, Mr. Krick. If he gives you any trouble, come see me. Gunnar grinned. Why yes, ma'am, I surely will. For that, Anson stated, still glowering, I won't ask my wife to make discreet inquiries about the lady we saw earlier this afternoon. What lady? Sarah asked, her eyes glancing from one to the other. Gunnar tipped his hat to her. Ma'am. With a quick wink in her direction, Gunnar left the blacksmith shop, whistling under his breath. Chapter 3. Cara's first few days under Mrs. Bracken were bearable. The crotchety old woman ordered her to sweep the floors, then scrub them, wash her clothes, dust the displays, then arrange them in an attractive fashion that Cara actually liked doing. She feared she was the only target of the old woman's bitterness, but she soon discovered Mrs. Bracken treated her customers the same way. Though Cara did not know the white man's traditions, she recognized dislike directed toward her employer when she saw it. But she also heard people saying that Mrs. Bracken was the only seamstress in Sweetwater, and thus the villagers put up with her. They had no choice. She had known an old woman of the Quapaw who was like Mrs. Bracken, old and not very nice. However, the Quapaw woman was respected for her wisdom and healing knowledge, and revered for her old age. Mrs. Bracken was neither respected nor liked, and if anyone revered her, Cara could not detect it. No, Mrs. Bracken snapped from her shoulder. Take smaller stitches. Make them neat and orderly. What is the matter, girl? You never held a needle before? Over and over, Cara practiced sewing tiny, neat stitches in the cloth, often stabbing herself in the finger or thumb, then bleeding all over the garment. When that happened, Mrs. Bracken slapped her and made her try again. Stick the needle through, yes, like that, and pull the thread all the way, then back in. Cara once again stuck the needle into her own finger. You stupid idiot. Mrs. Bracken glared at her. Look at you, an ignorant squaw unable to make a simple stitch without blundering it up. Even a child of 5 can stitch better than you. Cara had had enough. Throwing the garment down, complete with the needle, she bolted. Cara fled, crying, out through the back door, with Mrs. Bracken screaming at her to come back or she'd call the sheriff. Cara knew the main street of town, so she easily escaped without being seen, and she ran for the hills. The gown she wore hindered her considerably, but on she went, sobbing until she thought her heart would break. She hated it here. She did not understand these people. She could not communicate with Mrs. Bracken to explain she was trying her best. The Quapaw, her family, were patient with her when teaching her something new. No, she did not exactly fit in there either, but she lived better there than she did in this white village. Cara had not seen Mary or Thomas since they left her, and some part of her figured it was Mrs. Bracken and her viciousness that kept them away. Her weeping fit over, Cara walked on through the hills, dejected and miserable, knowing she could never fit in with the people she belonged to. Perhaps I should simply go live in the mountains. I do not belong anywhere, but I might belong there. Pausing, Cara gazed at the distant mountains, wondering how many sleeps it would take to get there. No one in this village of Sweetwater would miss her, and she knew she had the skills to survive on her own. Walking on, she considered her options. She had no way of knowing how to get back to the Quapaw in Oklahoma, yet even if she did, they might send her away. After all, the chief told her to find a home and husband among the whites. Cara knew she would not be welcomed back. But she knew how to build a shelter, make weapons, kill game, skin and tan the hides, and preserve meats and vegetables. She did not know what the winters were like in this region, but she knew how to survive one. As she pondered, walking across the hills, the whinnying of horses caught her attention. Cresting a hill, she dropped to her belly and watched the scene below. A series of buildings and corrals lay at the base of the hill, several horses milling about their enclosures. She understood horses. Even the Quapaw admired her way with them. Once, she sang to the most vicious of stallions, a horse no one could touch. Upon hearing her song, the stallion came to her and bent his neck and became her slave. As no one seemed to be around the place below, Cara crept from thicket to rock to tree, making her way, unseen, down the hill. The horses spotted her with ears up and eyes wide, but none made a sound as she walked among them, caressing long faces, singing under her breath. Most followed her, their noses touching her arms, her shoulders, their warm breath on her skin, their whiskers tickling her flesh. Cautious, she expected a white man, the owner, to come out yelling and brandishing a weapon, but it never happened. She recognized these horses as youngsters, with the bright curiosity of the youth everywhere. One in particular, a black and white pinto, pinned his ears at the rest, keeping them away from her. Cara sang to him, stroking his muzzle, his ears, then walked down his body, trailing her fingers down his neck to his shoulder. Grabbing a handful of his thick mane, she vaulted aboard his bare back. Not trying to guide him, she let him carry her around the pen, mingling with the others who still followed after. The pinto ambled around, walking where he wanted, followed by the other curious horses who still tried to nuzzle her. Caressing their faces in passing, she sang to them, feeling happier than she had for a very long while. Suddenly the pinto stiffened, his head up and nostrils flared. The others also stared, their ears pointing toward the man who walked toward the corral. Cara ceased her song, also staring, wondering what she should do. The man stopped, leaning against the pen's top rail. "You do realize that is a pen full of wild horses who ain't never been broke to halter?" Chapter 4. Gunnar couldn't believe what he was seeing. He swore up and down that this was the girl he saw in town a few days back, now on his property and riding one of the colts he'd purchased from a fellow who planned to sell them to a slaughterhouse. He'd hoped he could break them and sell them, but they were wilder than March hares, and he'd begun to think he'd wasted his money. Until now. The girl and the pinto stared at him, unmoving. Some of the other horses in the pen edged away from him, worried. He didn't move, concerned that the pinto might spook and throw her. She was a delicate-seeming girl, her long glossy black hair swaying gently under the light summer breeze. Her eyes captivated him, huge and the color of raw honey, her skin lightly tanned yet with a clear, pure complexion. He recognized a wildness about her, as though she were as untamed as the horse she rode. And as beautiful. Keeping his voice low and light, Gunnar said, "You sure have a way with ponies, ma'am. I must say I am impressed. I'm Gunnar Krick, and I own this spread." Though the pinto didn't move, the girl finally slid down from his back but kept a hand on his withers. Gunnar had not been able to get within 10 feet of that colt, much less handle him with the natural ease this girl did. She continued to stare at him, no doubt as prepared to run as the colt. "I expect you might be able to teach me a thing or three about taming wild hosses," he said, grinning. "Might I ask your name, ma'am?" For a long moment, Gunnar didn't think she would answer him. At last she spoke. "Cara. That is a lovely name, Miss Cara. Would you care to have a cup of coffee with me? Perhaps a bite of bread and beef?" Hesitant, she took a step toward him, then another, slowly, clearly ready to bolt if he made any sudden moves. Then she slid through the wooden rails of the corral with an athleticism he never knew a woman to have. She kept a distance between them as they walked toward the house and a wary eye on him that made him smile. "Have a seat on the porch and I'll bring it out." Going into the house, Gunnar glanced back, seeing her sit gingerly on the edge of the chair, gazing around curiously. He quickly gathered together bread and cold roast with biscuits and 2 cups of coffee. Awkwardly juggling all of it, he went back out and set the food down on a small table. Miss Cara offered him a shy, half-smile as she accepted the hot cup from him. "If you don't mind me saying, Miss Cara," he said, sitting down. "You are a mite skinny. Please, eat." The girl needed no urging from him. As though she hadn't eaten for days, she wolfed the food down with a savage hunger that made his brow rise. Gunnar felt disturbed, and no little anger as he watched her devour her food. Her appetite took his away, and he pushed his plate toward her. "You need that more than I do," he said. "Who is looking after you, Miss Cara? Where are you staying?" She swallowed and took a sip of her coffee. Mrs. Ken, she said, her mouth stumbling over the words. Gunnar snorted, and the sound startled her enough that he thought she would run. No, please sit, eat. That old biddy can't take care of an alley cat, much less a girl. Do you work for her? Cara nodded, chewing bread and meat, washing it down with the coffee. Gunnar stroked his mustache as he pondered her. Do you not speak so good, Miss Cara? She slowly shook her head, then rattled off something in a language he had never heard before. Gunnar cocked his head, puzzled by it. It wasn't Spanish, he knew, nor did it sound like anything from Europe. Where might you be from? Quapaw. Oklahoma. Ah. Gunnar nodded. You're a half-breed from the Quapaw Indians? Miss Cara shook her head. White. A white girl raised by the Quapaw Indians? This time he received a nod. And someone brought you here from Oklahoma, and put you up with that old biddy? Again, he received the nod. Obviously, she understood the white man's language but could not speak it very well. No wonder she ran away from Mrs. Bracken, if that was how she came to be at his ranch. That woman wasn't known for her kindness nor her patience, and if Miss Cara worked and lodged with her, Gunnar knew she was in for a hard time. Yet, there was no other choice for her. An indigent girl with no home and few English language skills had very few options, he knew. He would have to take her back to the witch. I am sorry, Miss Cara, he said, genuine regret in his tone. I have to take you back into town. Though she had eaten almost everything on her plate, Miss Cara pushed the rest away as though his words had stolen her hunger. She looked away from him, staring out over the distant hills. He understood what she must be feeling, alone, displaced, frightened. At home among no one, friendless, neither Indian nor truly white. There's nothing I can do for her except take her back. Given her obvious riding skills, Gunnar saddled 2 horses rather than hitch them to the wagon. Miss Cara stood by, her head down, and Gunnar felt as though he was returning her to prison to face execution rather than to a seamstress shop where she had a roof over her head. Riding side by side, he tried getting her to talk, but she refused to even give him nods or shakes of her head in response to his questions. Dusk had settled in by the time he and Miss Cara reined in beside Mrs. Bracken's shop. Gunnar dismounted to help her down from her saddle, but she slid effortlessly down and stood staring as Mrs. Bracken herself came out the door, scowling. Where was she? The old woman demanded. Gunnar tipped his hat politely. Out to my ranch, ma'am. Get inside, you, Mrs. Bracken snapped at the girl. For running away, you won't get any supper tonight. Go to your room. Glad he fed her, Gunnar watched with no little anger as the old woman grabbed Miss Cara by the arm and shoved her toward the door. The girl hesitated before going through, and glanced back over her shoulder. Thank you, she said, meeting his eyes before crossing the threshold. Mrs. Bracken slammed the door shut behind them. You're welcome, he said softly. Chapter 5. Cara's sewing improved slowly, certainly not fast enough to suit Mrs. Bracken, however. Used to stitching heavy hides with sinew, she wasn't used to the thin thread and tiny needle used for cotton. Still, she made small improvements, didn't stab herself nearly as often, and completed a gown's hem that the old woman set her to mending. She continued to clean the shop and launder, stack bolts of cloth and arrange them in an enticing display before customers arrived. One afternoon, the bell over the door chimed, announcing a customer. Mrs. Bracken heaved herself out of her chair where she sewed a garment on a mannequin and went to the front of the store. She returned a few moments later. You have a visitor, she said, her tone harsh. Only a few minutes, then you get back to work. Cara set down her needle and went to the front. Mary Fitzgerald stood by the counter, holding a small round platter covered by a napkin. She smiled as she saw Cara, setting the object down on the counter. I am sorry I have not been by earlier to visit, Mary said. I brought you a cake. Not knowing what a cake was, Cara still understood she had been brought a gift. But she had no gift to give in return. Her face fell when she realized she could not accept it. Except. Holding up her hand in a quick signal for Mary to wait, Cara hurried to her room. Her few possessions still lay in the wicker basket, and she rummaged through the items in it, searching for the necklace of beads she had made. Finding it, she took it to the front where Mary still waited, her expression one of mild confusion. Her face brightened as she saw what Cara held in her hand. "For me?" she asked, as Cara held it out to her. "Dear, really, you don't have to give me anything in return." Cara shook her head fiercely, then pressed the beads into Mary's hand. "Gift." Mary slipped it over her neck. "They're beautiful." "Thank you." Cara picked up the cake. "Thank you." "You are most welcome, dear. I must run, but I will try to get back to see you soon." Cara watched her go, the bell over the door tinkling as it opened and closed behind her. Warmth filled her. She did not feel quite alone as she once had, and she wondered if she had found a friend in Mary. The cake smelled wonderful, making her stomach rumble. Mrs. Bracken had not permitted her to eat yet this day, insisting she finish sewing the ruffle on a gown first. As the task was arduous and difficult for her, she had not yet completed it. She walked carefully to the back of the store, carrying her possession proudly. Mrs. Bracken eyed her with curiosity and disapproval. "What you got there?" "Cake." "Set it down there and get back to work. You can have some of it later." Obedient, Cara set it down on a table where it would not be knocked aside by accident, then returned to her mannequin to complete the ruffle. Anticipation made her fingers suddenly nimble, and she fairly flew through the stitches that attached the ruffle to the gown. An hour later, she proudly showed her accomplishment to Mrs. Bracken. The old woman inspected it carefully, then nodded. "Go upstairs and get yourself biscuits and cheese. They're on the table." "Cake." "Later." Mrs. Bracken waved her hand in dismissal. Too hungry to argue, Cara went up the stairs to the living quarters over the shop, finding 2 small biscuits and wedge of cheese on the table. Devouring them, she pumped water from the sink to wash it down with. Still hungry, but eager to try some of her precious cake, Cara returned downstairs. Mrs. Bracken sat in her usual place sewing, but the cake was gone. Only the platter and a few crumbs remained. Cara stared in disbelief. Her gaze traveled from the platter to Mrs. Bracken's triumphant, beady eyes, and back again. "Cake. I do not believe you are deserving of such nice things," the old woman replied. "I threw it out." Running toward the back door that opened onto the alley, she stared in shock. 2 mongrel dogs, rumbling growls at one another, feasted on the remains of the sweet gift Mary brought her. Tears flooded down her cheeks, and her heart wrenched in her chest. Cara ran, scattering the dogs. Down the alley, past houses and startled people, setting other dogs to barking at her, she kept running. Blinded by her tears, she fled, leaving the town behind. Darkness fell as she wandered across the hills, the bright moonlight giving her enough light to see by. Her tears spent, but her heart still hurting, she walked toward the only place where she felt truly happy. Gunnar Krick's horse ranch. She thought it close to the middle of the night when she arrived, tired and hungry. Standing on the hill gazing down, no lights showed in the house that she could see. Making her way down, Cara once more made her way amid the young horses, singing softly. Too hungry to linger among them, she slipped through the corral and walked to the barn, hoping Gunnar Krick had left some food in there. Finding only some dried apples and oats, and even knowing it was stealing, Cara ate until she could hold no more. Taking a long drink of water from the trough, she curled upon a pile of straw, wondering what she might give Gunnar in return for the food she ate. She fell asleep listening to the breeze over the roof and the sound of horses. Chapter 6. Gunnar stared in bafflement. Cara lay on a mound of straw in his barn, sleeping. "What the devil," he muttered, running his fingers down his mustache. Though his words were spoken softly, Cara woke immediately, and saw him. Fear etched its way across her pretty face, and she glanced around quickly, no doubt searching for a place to run. Gunnar held his hands up in a placating gesture. "No, it's all right," he said, his voice quiet so as not to spook her. I just finished breakfast. Are you hungry? I can fry you up some bacon and eggs if you'd like. Cara watched him carefully, then slowly nodded. Standing, she brushed bits of straw off her gown, and gestured toward the barrels of feed. Confused, Gunnar stepped closer, wondering what she was trying to tell him. I'm not understanding you, Miss Cara. Once more, she mimed opening the barrels, then gestured toward her mouth. Glancing inside, he saw several dried apples and some oats appeared to be missing. He stared at her. You're telling me you ate some of my horse feed? Cara nodded. Sorry. Do not concern yourself over that, he said, feeling his anger rise. If you were hungry enough to eat that, then you must have been very hungry. Doesn't that old woman feed you? When she lifted her shoulders in a shrug and spread her fingers wide, he translated that to be, sometimes. She then motioned with her hands in a giving gesture. At his confusion, she made the motion again. You want to give me something for eating some oats? Cara nodded. That is not necessary, ma'am. Well, then, before I take you back, let me get some decent grub into you. When Gunnar would have walked out of the barn, he discovered Cara had not followed him. Glancing over his shoulder, he found her staring at him, an expression of fear and dismay on her face. He set his hands on his hips, wishing fervently there was something more he could do for her. I am sorry, Miss Cara, he said, turning back. It's not that I don't want you here. I don't mind, truly. But it's not proper for a young miss to live at the same place as an unmarried man such as myself. I have to take you back. This time, she followed him, her expression downcast. She sat on his porch, watching the horses as he went back inside to fry up more bacon and eggs, adding bread to the big plate he fixed her. Once again, Gunnar watched in disbelief as she devoured the food like a half-starved wolf. This is just wrong, he muttered. Once again, he saddled 2 horses, and rode beside her into Sweetwater, not bothering to ask her any questions. He knew that if she continued at the seamstress shop, she would most likely starve to death. Rotten penny-pinching old bat. It's not like she can't afford to feed the poor thing. Rumors in town spoke of Mrs. Bracken's departed husband leaving her comfortably well off, so he knew it wasn't money that kept Cara without food. However, this time when the old seamstress greeted them at the door, it was with Cara's few possessions in her hands. She is no longer welcome or wanted here, Mrs. Bracken snapped. Take her to Mary Fitzgerald, will you? I'll no longer abide her under my roof. Now Gunnar grew truly angry. You can't just send her away like that. She has nowhere to go. That is not my problem. Mrs. Bracken started to close the door, but Gunnar stuck his boot between it and the jamb. Did you agree to pay her a wage, Mrs. Bracken? Yes, but she hardly worked enough to earn it. I happen to know you scarcely feed her, he growled, his hat pulled low over his eyes. That was also your agreement, was it not? That's none of your business, young man. I'm making it my business. Pay her the money you owe her right now. Gunnar lowered his face and his voice. Do it or your reputation in this town is ruined. I will see to it that everyone knows how you cheated a homeless girl and refused to feed her. Do you want that? Mrs. Bracken hesitated. Stay here, and I'll get it. He would not allow her to close the door, and kept his foot there as she shuffled away. He glanced at Cara, still sitting on her horse, weeping silent tears. Helpless frustration rushed through him. He wanted so much to help her, but didn't know what he could do. Mrs. Fitzgerald will fix things, Miss Cara, he said. Don't worry. She turned her face away. Mrs. Bracken returned with $2 in a small platter, shoving both at him. Give this back to Mary Fitzgerald, she ordered. Tell her the dogs enjoyed it very much. What? She brought a cake for the girl. Mrs. Bracken sneered. I fed it to the mutts. Before he could vent his fury, the old woman slammed the door in his face. Gunnar stared at the closed door, hearing it lock, unable to believe what she'd said. No wonder the poor girl ran away. He turned slowly, then walked to Cara. He handed the bills up to her as she sat in the saddle, gazing down. She shook her head, refusing to take them. "Go on," he said. "You earned it." Once again, she shook her head, and pushed his hand back. "You keep," she said. "This is too much for a few apples and oats." Cara turned away, ignoring the money he held up to her. Muttering under his breath, Gunnar mounted his horse. Reining around, he headed back up the street, hearing her gelding plod behind him. After asking for directions to the mayor's house, he finally found it and dismounted. Tying his horse to the lamp post out front, he walked onto the porch and knocked on the door. Mrs. Fitzgerald glanced from him to Cara. "Oh, no. What happened?" "She ran away from the seamstress," he explained, his hat in his hand. "Ended up at my place. Now the old biddy won't let her come back." He handed Mrs. Fitzgerald the platter, his smile bitter. "She fed your cake to the dogs." Mrs. Fitzgerald blew out an exasperated sigh. "That petty old woman. Well, I'm sorry it didn't work out, but I am hardly surprised. Cara, come in. You can stay here until I find something else for you." Gunnar pitched his voice low as Miss Cara slid down from her horse and gathered her few possessions. "That biddy hardly fed her either. She coughed up this." Gunnar pressed the $2 into Mrs. Fitzgerald's hand. "But Miss Cara refuses to take it. Will you keep it for her? Or put it toward her food and board?" "I will take it on her behalf," Mrs. Fitzgerald said, putting the money in her pocket. "I will make her accept it in time." Mrs. Fitzgerald opened the door wide to allow Cara to enter her home. Once again, the girl turned to him and said, "Thank you." "You are most welcome, Miss Cara." "I thank you as well, Mr. Krick," Mrs. Fitzgerald told him. "I'll look after her until I can find another more suitable arrangement for her." "You are a kind woman, Mrs. Fitzgerald." Mounting his horse and taking the other's reins, Gunnar nudged his horse into a trot, heading down the main street to the road that led to his ranch. Though he felt better about leaving the girl in Mrs. Fitzgerald's hands, somehow he knew trouble remained in store for Cara. Chapter 7. Mr. Swanson, the owner of the Swanson Café, eyed Cara while tapping his foot. "Yes, I could use the help, Mrs. Fitzgerald. But this girl has a reputation for not being a good worker and she is a troublemaker. You know quite well that Mrs. Bracken is a mean-minded and mean-spirited old woman," Mary replied. "Truth be told, I'm sorry I ever set her up there. I had hoped it would work out, but I was wrong." Cara here did the best she could under the circumstances. The stout man rubbed his jaw. "I suppose you are correct about Mrs. Bracken. Very well, I will give the girl a chance. 75 cents a week. There's a bunk in the attic, and 3 meals a day. Can't say fairer than that." Thus, Cara began a second career in Sweetwater, up to her elbows in hot, soapy water cleaning dishes. She also scrubbed tables and floors, washed the café's linens, and occasionally assisted with the cooking. Given her limited English, Mr. Swanson did not trust her to wait tables, but his wife managed that well enough, as long as she didn't also have the other responsibilities. At first, things seemed to go better for Cara. The Swansons were distant, but treated her well and fed her generously. They seemed pleased with her work, and at the end of her first week, Mr. Swanson placed 75 cents in her hand. Though she still felt lonely and out of place, hardly ever speaking, Cara threw herself into her work, and out of exhaustion slept soundly every night. But as it seemed to be her fate, things turned wrong for her again. It started when she finished washing a stack of dishes, dried them, and lifted them to place them inside the cupboard. Her hands, damp and slick with soap, missed their grip on the stack. The dishes fell with a crash to the floor, smashing into pieces and bringing Mr. Swanson on the run. "What happened?" he bellowed, seeing for himself the disaster on the floor. Cara shook with fear, fearing he would punish her by beating her and then turn her out. The man, angry enough, shook his head at the mess. "Clean all that up, Cara. You'll pay for those dishes out of your salary." She nodded, filled with relief, and set to sweeping up the broken dishes. The money she received meant little to her, as she did not know what to do with it. But she still had work, a roof over her head and food to eat. She threw the crockery away, then continued her work, though she was very careful not to break anything again. A few days later, the cafe filled up with hungry customers, and the Swansons were rushed. So was Cara, cleaning tables and sweeping the floors after the customers ate, then clearing the crumbs and napkins and dishes. She washed dishes and glassware at a frantic pace, only to have more arrive for her to scrub and dry. "Cara," Mr. Swanson boomed. "Take this to the table in the corner." He handed her a tray filled with hot soup as she stared at him in dismay. She had no words to explain she did not know how to serve the customers. He scowled at her. "It's all right," he said, impatient. "Just set each bowl of soup in front of a person at the table. My wife is busy, and I don't want this to get cold. Go on." Carefully, Cara took the tray in both hands, then walked out into the dining room filled with laughing, talking customers. She saw the table of 4 people, 2 men and 2 women, and the 4 bowls on the tray. Walking as though she stepped on cactus spines, Cara made her way to their table. The men glanced up at her, smiling, while the 2 women continued to talk. Thinking she had the platter balanced on her left hand, she reached for a hot bowl. She did not have it balanced though, and upon taking off the bowl, the entire platter fell onto the table with a resounding crash. The women screamed as hot soup splashed them, and the men cursed, jumping up from their chairs. Silence fell across the entire cafe. Mortified, Cara had no idea what to do. She repeated sorry several times, trying to pick up the bowls and wipe the table with a napkin. Her face flushed bright red with humiliation, and she felt her eyes sting with unshed tears. Turning, she discovered the entire cafe staring at her. "That is it," Mr. Swanson yelled. "Get your things and leave. You're fired." While Cara did not know what fired meant, she certainly knew the meaning of his other words. Fleeing across the silent, staring cafe, she ran for the stairs and up to the attic. Putting her few possessions in the wicker basket, her sobs finally took hold. She had nowhere to go. She could not stay with Mary, for her small house was already crowded with her husband and her boys. No one else would take her in after this. Chatter in the dining room began again as she hurried out the doors, her basket clutched to her chest. All eyes watched her flee, witnessing her tears of shame and fear. No one stood up to offer her help or consolation. No one spoke a word to Mr. Swanson that it was an accident, it could happen to anyone, give her another chance. She felt their condemnation crawl over her skin as she opened the door and fled into the street. Her panic followed her into the hills as she ran away for the last time. "I will not go back. I cannot go back." While Cara knew that Gunnar, upon finding her again, would take her back into Sweetwater, she knew she must find a way to hide from him. If she sheltered in his barn, she could forage for food in the hills. He need never know she was there. She liked him, and wished she could stay on his property and care for the horses. However, he had told her it was not proper, a word she thought as useless as trying to drink sand. If a man and a woman wanted to be together, they should be together, if he wanted to, that is. Watching the house from atop the hill, Cara waited until night had closed in completely and the lights in Gunnar's house went out. She crept down to the horses, who greeted her with nickers and nudges. She caressed their faces as she passed among them, then slipped out the other side of the pen. Checking around herself anxiously for any watching eyes, she entered the barn and walked to the very last stall. Most of the stalls held horses, but there were a few that contained bales of hay, straw, or feed. The very last one held nothing save old straw that was still fairly clean. Taking her knife and its sheath on a belt from her basket, she strapped the belt around her waist. Then she buried the rest of her possessions under the straw and left the barn. The moon gave her enough light to see by as she walked toward the forest. Hunting owls floated low over her head, and she knew that where owls were, there would be rabbits. Cutting branches from a tree, Cara stripped them of their bark with her knife, then used thin strips torn from her gown, braided together, to make a snare. After concealing her odor by rubbing the snare in deer droppings, she set it carefully along a half-hidden rabbit trail. Retreating a distance away, she sat in a thicket to wait for her supper to come along. Patient, she watched the moon and stars sail across the heavens. Within an hour, she heard the distant thrashing in the brush, which told her she'd caught her dinner. Rising, she walked back to her snare and found the freshly killed rabbit. Dismantling the snare, she went back with her catch to the thicket. Building a small fire, she gutted and skinned her prey, then spitted it over the fire to roast. As it cooked, Cara scraped the hide clean with her knife, then used the rabbit's brains to work into it for tanning. Returning to Gunnar's barn to sleep on the straw until dawn, Cara knew she would need bigger weapons than a single knife to see her through the winter. Though she had never done it, she knew how to build a bow, and cut and fletch arrows. Lying down to sleep, comfortable and fed, she drifted to sleep while mentally planning a future home in the mountains. Chapter 8. Leading a string of 5 horses tied together, Gunnar rode into Sweetwater to the blacksmith's shop. Anson stood waiting for him, the fires of his forges burning behind him. Gunnar swung down from his saddle and shook the big man's hand. "I have news of that little gal you were inquiring about," Anson said as he helped Gunnar tie each of the horses to the hitching rail. "So do I," Gunnar replied, leading the last horse into the hot shop. "You first." Picking up the horse's right front hoof, Anson examined it, used his rasp to cut away excess hoof wall, then went to his rack of horseshoes. Well, she was kidnapped by Quapaw Indians when she was about 5 years old. Raised by them, she learned their ways. Rumors went around the reservation in Oklahoma about her after all that time, and a fellow named Kevin Harding, an old trapper and Indian trader, went there to rescue her. The Indians just let her go? It seems so. Anson hammered on the shoe, took it back to the horse, and began nailing it to the horse's hoof. He telegraphed the mayor here in Sweetwater, claiming there was a reward waiting for him. Mr. and Mrs. Fitzgerald, being kind people, wanted her away from the Indians, so they said, of course, bring the girl here. And did he collect his reward? It seems there was no reward at all, but there was nothing Harding could do by then. The girl, named Cara Warring, was called Wajika by the Quapaw. No one knows where her family is, or if they are still alive. They certainly didn't post a reward for her return. So, Harding did all that for nothing. His problem. Anyway, Mrs. Fitzgerald got her working for that old bat Mrs. Bracken, and when that didn't work out, tried the Swansons at the cafe. Gunnar sighed, stroking his hand down his horse's face. That didn't work out, either. Nope. But how did you know that? Because the girl is hiding in my barn. Anson straightened, dropping the hoof to the ground. So now what? Gunnar shrugged. She thinks I don't know, but I see her scuttling back and forth at night from my windows. She feeds herself in the forest, but I'm afraid she's going to get herself killed out there. I imagine she knows more about survival in the wild than either you or me. That doesn't matter. Even the Indians needed their tribe to survive the winters. What chance does she have on her own? So, what will you do? Anson asked him. Persuade her to come in, find another business to employ her? No one will take her in, Gunnar. She has a reputation as a wild one who is difficult to get along with. That's ridiculous. Maybe. Anson bent to pick up the hoof again and continued hammering nails into it. But people believe it and she will find no welcome in Sweetwater. Not now. Gunnar paced, frustrated. That's not right. Anson used the rasp to file the nail heads off, dropped the hoof and straightened. What of you? Weren't you looking for a wife? Gunnar kicked at the wooden wall. She'd be perfect. She's a genius with horses. She's smart and beautiful and... My mail-order bride already accepted my proposal. She'll be here in a month. Oh. What a dust-up, eh? Never thought I'd be caught between two women. You can always write to her and say you changed your mind. And what if Miss Cara runs back to Oklahoma? Gunnar asked. What if she doesn't want to marry me? While she looks good as it were, there are too many unknowns at this point. True enough, Anson replied, working on the horse's other front foot. I suppose it might be best to leave things as they are and wait. I suppose so. I just hate seeing her out there, hiding like some criminal. Do you have a place you can fix up for her? Anson asked. It wouldn't be proper to invite her to live with you in your house. But perhaps a place in the barn where she can be safe and comfortable? Still pacing, Gunnar pondered. Maybe. I have an old shed I don't use. It has a rusty old stove in it, and more than enough room for a single girl. It might work. Come back tomorrow. With your wagon. Why? It just so happens I have some old furniture I don't need. Sarah doesn't want it either. Your friend may just want a bed to sleep on. Thus, Gunnar continued to pretend he didn't know he had an interloper living in his barn, and early the following morning drove his buckboard into town. Anson, with Sarah looking on with approval, helped him load a wood bed frame, a chair, and a small table into the wagon. Anson added a mattress sack after throwing out the old ticking in it. Sarah went into the house and returned with blankets, a pillow, and sheets. Wait, Sarah implored Gunnar as he climbed into the driver's seat. Don't go yet. She bolted back into the house. As he and Anson chatted on, waiting for her, she returned with an armload of food. Gunnar gazed at her in astonishment as she loaded small sacks of potatoes and onions, a sack of sugar, another of salt, half a slab of bacon, and then ran into the house for more. Is she depleting your stores? Gunnar asked. I doubt it. Sarah is always gathering food. She's like a regular squirrel, stocking food away. Sarah returned with another armload, this time with a roast of beef and 2 hams. Enough, Gunnar said, laughing. I can contribute to her food resources, too. I won't let her starve. See that you don't, mister, Sarah warned. Gunnar hopped down from the high seat, and hugged her, kissing her cheek. I will be certain Miss Cara knows the food and furniture came from you too. Just keep that girl safe, Sarah said. That's all I ask. I will. I promise. Chapter 9. Certain that Gunnar did not know she survived in the hills and spent her nights in his barn, Cara whittled a bough from a stout chunk of juniper. It had taken her most of the day to complete it, and she had foregone hunting in order to get it finished. Hungry, she thought to raid Gunnar's barrels of oats and apples later, though she knew that was wrong. So instead, she munched on some wild berries and nuts she found as she hunted for the right kind of material to make a bowstring. In luck, she found a patch of nettles. Cutting a bunch, she sliced away the stinging spines, and pulled out the inner fibers necessary for braiding a bowstring. Returning to her favorite spot high over Gunnar's ranch, she saw him puttering around below, but she was too far away to see what he was doing. He seemed to be carrying items from his wagon into a shed situated behind his barn. Creating the bowstring, she sang under her breath, immersed in her work as she considered how best to build a shelter that would enable her to survive the winter. Dark soon fell, and with it the lights in Gunnar's house. Even without the moonlight, as the moon had not yet risen and would not wax full that night, Cara made her way easily down the hill. Though still hungry, she decided against raiding Gunnar's apples and went to her stall. The night would be warm and somewhat humid, so she had no need of a blanket to keep her warm. She had no more settled into her bed of straw to sleep, her new bough at her hand, when a lantern flared brightly. Her mouth dry with panic, Cara had nowhere to go. Trapped in the stall, no arrows to use to protect herself, Cara jumped up, her knife in her hand. Gunnar walked toward her, the flaring torch held over his head. They stared at one another for a long moment. Then he smiled. Hello, Miss Cara. He is not surprised. He knew I was in here. Cara knew that if she could get past him, she could outrun him, then vanish into the hills. But how to get past him? He stood in front of the stall's door. As he made no move to attack her or drag her out with accusations, she stood still, waiting. "Look," he said. "I know things aren't going so well for you in Sweetwater. But you can't keep living in my barn. So, I came up with a place for you. You're welcome to stay as long as you need." Cara cocked her head to the side, thinking. What could he mean? She now knew enough about white men to know she could not live with him in his house, nor did she want to. "Come with me. I'd like to show it to you." Gunnar held out his hand, inviting. Lowering her knife, but keeping it in her hand, Cara opened the door and stepped out into the barn. Horses stuck their heads out of their stalls, hoping for food, or just curious about the human invasion in their territory. She followed him out, then around to the back of the building. Confused, Cara wondered if he was planning to take her into the fields. Instead, he opened the door to the shed and stood back. "You can stay in here. I hope you like it." He held the torch up so she could peer cautiously around the doorway. She gasped in shock. A newly polished stove stood to one side, a stack of wood ready to burn. A small bed stood against the far wall, complete with mattress, pillow, sheets and a coverlet. The walls hung with sacks of food, slabs of meat and hams, while a small table held a tin plate, cups and tableware. A pot and a frying pan hung on pegs over the stove. On the stove was a lamp and a box of matches. Cara stared at him, unable to speak, even if she had had the means to share her thoughts. Gunnar grinned. "I only contributed the stove and the building. The rest were supplied by my friends Anson and Sarah in town. This way, you have your privacy, you can come and go as you please and you have food. I told you before, you're too thin." Walking inside, Cara had very little room, but it was so much better than the horse stall. She could cook, sleep in peace, and if the nights grew cold, she could have a fire. And since Gunnar didn't seem to mind having her around, she could spend time with the horses. "Thank you," she said. "Gunnar. I like the way you say my name." He stared at her, into her eyes, and she at him. Something seemed to pass between them, some sort of strange connection she had never felt before. Almost as though she had known him all her life. As though she had been searching for him, and now she had found him. The feeling confused her, and she dropped her eyes, backing away. The moment vanished. Gunnar coughed, clearing his throat. "I saw you made a bow. If you need feathers for arrows, I killed a turkey not long ago. The feathers are at the edge of the field straight past the shed here. I'll gladly pay you for any meat you bring in." Cara shook her head. "No. I stay here." She gestured around the shed. Good." She shook her head, trying to find the words. "Good. I bring meat to you." His grin blossomed. "Listen to you talk, Miss Cara. I like it." He tapped on the door, glancing at it. "This here door is stout, but it doesn't have a bar to hold it closed. I ran out of time to make one, but I promise I'll make one tomorrow. You will be safe in here." Cara nodded, feeling happier than she had since she rode the black and white pony. "I know." Gunnar handed her the torch. "Let me light that lamp for you, and I'll let you be." He moved past her, opened the chimney, and struck a match to the striker. He lit the lamp and closed the chimney, then smiled as he took his lantern from her. "I'll be getting on home then." Still, he stood for a long moment, gazing into her eyes as though unwilling to leave. Cara didn't want him to go. Sharing that moment with him, she found in him something she could not put a name to. A deep feeling of something. He broke their eye contact with a grin. "Get some sleep. I'll see you in the morning." The shed felt cold and empty after he closed the door and left. There were no windows, so she could not watch him walk away. Cara sighed, and her stomach reminded her it held only some berries and nuts from a long time ago. Smiling, Cara stacked wood in the stove and lit it. The tiny house warmed so quickly and uncomfortably, she was forced to open the door as she cut some bacon from the side and fried it with a potato she cut up with her knife. Thus, she sat in her own little home, ate a meal cooked by her own hand, and went to sleep smiling in her own bed. The next morning, she rose before dawn as she had when she lived with the Quapaw, cooked some breakfast, then dressed herself in her now very shabby and grubby gown. Gazing down at it, she wondered how she might get some fresh clothes. "I expect Gunnar cannot provide everything." She sighed, and went outside to the well to fetch water to wash her utensils and pans in, then more to clean herself. Dawn broke pink over the eastern horizon as she walked to the barn to begin feeding the horses. She sang as she doled out pitchfork loads of hay, and oats and apples from the barrels. Then she brought buckets of water into the barn just as Gunnar emerged from the house. He entered the barn in time to see her pouring water from her bucket into a horse's water trough, and all the horses inside happily munching their oats. "Did you leave me anything to do?" he asked, gazing around. Cara handed him a pitchfork and a shovel, then pointed toward the dirty straw in the stalls. Gunnar rolled his eyes. "Thanks. I think." After she finished feeding the outside horses, Cara joined him in mucking the stalls. They took the soiled straw and manure to the edge of the field where Gunnar pointed out a huge vegetable garden. "After this composts for a time, I spread it out over my vegetables. If I have more than I need, I spread it out in the fields to decompose out there." Chores completed, Cara followed Gunnar out to the wild horse pen. He stood against the rail, gazing down at her. "Now when we first met, you rode that pinto there. He won't let me near him. Just what did you do?" Cara slipped between the rails, singing. She felt his eyes on her, but she refused to let it intimidate her. Singing, she walked amid the horses who left their hay to come beg caresses from her hands, the pinto first and foremost among them. She walked amid the small herd of 5 horses, singing, letting them follow her, nudging her shoulders, her arms. When the pinto told her he was ready, she grabbed 2 fistfuls of his mane and vaulted aboard his back. Chapter 10. Once again, Gunnar stared in amazement. This slender girl, without a fearful bone in her body, walked among the wild horses as though she strolled in a park with friends. She sang to them, caressing outstretched faces, rubbed ears, her own long black hair streaming in the light wind. He recognized the moment when the pinto bent his neck toward his shoulder, his eyes bright and his ears perked forward, and told her in horse language she could mount. She grabbed his mane in her fists and swung her legs up and over his back, settling behind his withers with a grace he could never hope to achieve in this lifetime. The pinto walked around the corral, unconcerned about the predator human aboard him, munching his hay, pinning his ears at the less dominant of the herd, and, to Gunnar's eyes, reveling in the fact that she chose him over the others. Gunnar shook his head. He had never seen anything like it before. He did not want to speak, for it might break the spell she and the colt appeared to be under. She did not try to guide the pinto, only let him pick where he wanted to go and at what pace. When he charged, head down, neck low and ears flattened at another young horse, Cara merely let him carry her into battle. The other horse fled, leaving the pinto to stand triumphant as the herd leader. Cara slid down from his back. But instead of walking away, she grabbed a fistful of the colt's mane and led him toward the fence where Gunnar stood. The pinto followed her, trusting, standing quietly within a few feet of Gunnar. Knowing that if he moved suddenly, the colt would spin and run, he slowly lifted his hand toward the pinto's muzzle, permitting him to sniff it curiously. When Cara let the colt go, he didn't turn away. Gunnar kept his hand up, allowing the colt to sniff him over and decide if he was a threat. When the horse stood still, his ears slack and his eyes quiet, Gunnar gently stroked down the young colt's face. As Cara caressed his neck, still singing, Gunnar slowly slid between the bars of the fence. The horse perked his ears, but didn't move as Gunnar rubbed his neck from his near side. Keeping his voice low, Gunnar said, "These hosses trusted you immediately. Perhaps with you here, they'll learn to trust me. You know, I was going to give up on them." Cara broke off her quiet singing. "No give up. Never. I'm going to get a rope." Gunnar slipped between the rails again and walked quickly to the barn. Selecting a long length of soft rope as opposed to the stiffer rope made of hemp, he went back to the corral, tying a loop on one end. The pinto still stood with Cara, quietly enjoying the attention she gave him. The others stood a short distance away as though waiting for their turn. The colt still permitted him to ease slowly through the rails without spooking. Gunnar spoke softly as he held the rope up for the horse to inspect. Just gonna let him check it out. That's it. Good boy. Now, you gonna let me slip this here rope over your neck? The young horse permitted him to rub the rope over his neck and face, thus sliding over his neck was as nothing. Good boy. Gunnar rubbed his neck and face, then slowly looped the rope over his muzzle to fashion a halter. Gunnar grinned, and held the end of the rope to Cara. Do you want to do the honors? Smiling, Cara took the rope and walked away, tugging on it gently. The colt tossed his head at the unfamiliar pressure, but then followed willingly enough. She took several turns around the pen with him, then handed the rope to Gunnar. Come on, kid. Now more at ease with the rope on him, the pinto followed Gunnar around the corral. Gunnar stopped frequently, and used the halter to turn the horse left and right, and backed him up. Grinning widely, Gunnar wanted to shout with triumph, but he kept his voice quiet. That has to have been the easiest halter breaking I have ever seen. Cara nodded. Trust. They spent the next few hours working with the other young and wild horses, teaching them to accept the rope and human touch. Most were as easy as the pinto, but one lean sorrel filly proved more difficult. While she permitted Cara near her, she refused Gunnar's presence and reacted with panic anytime he came toward her. Cara only managed to rub the rope on her neck, but could not get it over her neck. That is still progress, Gunnar said when Cara finally let the filly go. Without you, I'd still be watching them show me their heels. Cara pointed toward the red filly. Pain. Much pain. Fear. You mean someone was too harsh with her? Gunnar asked. Treated her badly? Yes. Man. He stroked his mustache thoughtfully. So a man abused her, and now she is more afraid of men than women. Makes sense. Much time can fix. Well, Gunnar drawled. I expect we have plenty of that. Are you hungry? I think it's about time for some lunch. He had Cara sit on the porch while he went inside his house to fix them both sandwiches from a leftover beef roast, plates of beans and water drawn from the well. Cara ate with an appetite that pleased Gunnar, and he eyed her very shabby-looking gown. If you don't mind my saying so, he said, diffident. You sure could use some better clothes. She glanced down at herself and nodded. I have nothing. Listen, why don't we take a ride into town this afternoon, Gunnar said, washing down the last of his lunch with his cup of water. We can visit the mercantile, and get you some decent things to wear. Cara fiercely shook her head. No. No to new clothes. Or no to. I not go. Then how am I to find you something that fits proper? Stubborn, Cara folded her arms over her chest and gazed out over the ranch. Town, hate me. Then the best thing to do is spit in their eye. Still, despite her refusals, Gunnar did come to realize that if he showed up in town with her and went home with her, unmarried, it would cause no end of gossip. While he did abide by complete propriety in having her stay with him, in separate buildings, the Sweetwater gossips didn't know that. Cara had enough issues with those people without him adding more fuel to the fires. All right, Gunnar said finally, standing. I will ride into town alone, and hope I don't mess up by buying you the wrong things. Cara struggled with the words. I not, pay you. I have no, coin. Lifting her chin with his finger, Gunnar smiled into her lustrous eyes. Now you more than paid me by the work you did this morning. A couple of dresses hardly covers what I owe you. Though she shook her head, gazing down, Gunnar settled his hat on his head and headed for the barn to saddle his horse. As he rode past the house, he could not see her. She no longer sat on the porch. Hoping she didn't run off again, he nudged his horse into a canter and headed for town. His luck was with him, as Sarah Holt was home and willing to accompany him to the mercantile. He answered her question, yes. Cara was happy with the arrangements. Yes, she was talking more. No, she would not come to town with him. I can't really blame her, Sarah said as they walked down the wooden sidewalk. I know what it's like to be on the outside of people's favor. It's not easy. With Sarah's assistance, he bought 3 simple dresses, thinking that Cara would prefer simplistic over ornate. Sarah also picked out a few undergarments and a few hair ribbons. At Gunnar's raised brow, Sarah shrugged. Women need ribbons to make themselves feel pretty. I would love to meet her, Sarah said as they walked back to the blacksmith's shop. Perhaps one day soon, Anson and I will ride out there to your ranch. You are welcome anytime. After placing his purchases into his saddlebags, Gunnar kissed Sarah's cheek, waved to Anson, then mounted up to ride home. Upon reaching his ranch, he discovered why Cara had vanished when he rode out. On the line hung his clothes, freshly washed and drying in the sun. Tying his horse to the rail, he grabbed his saddlebags, walked up the porch and into his newly cleaned, sparkling house. Cara, on her hands and knees, was busily scrubbing his kitchen floor. I hope this isn't a comment on my housekeeping skills, he said, using his thumb to push his hat back on his head. Cara frowned up at him, and gestured around the kitchen. Dirty. Not by my standards. Look, I brought you these. Opening the leather bags, he pulled out the dresses. She took them from him, gazing at them with awe. Thank you. And these. He gave her the undergarments and the ribbons. Sarah thought you might like them. Gunnar gestured toward her loose midnight hair flowing around her shoulders. For your, you know. Cara fingered the ribbons, tears welling in her eyes. Even as she smiled, her lips quivered. Ah, now don't be doing that, Gunnar told her, embarrassed. It was all Sarah's doing. Wiping away her tears, she smiled at him. You kind. Just don't let that get around. Why here? Might ruin my reputation. Chapter 11. Over the next week, Cara and Gunnar worked with the wild horses, teaching them to accept the saddle and bridle, and the riders on their backs. They walked, trotted, and loped them, teaching them the basics of neck reining, and how to stop on the word whoa. Gunnar informed her that she had a gift for horses, and constantly commented on how amazed he was at how easily those horses were tamed under her guidance. Cara merely shrugged off his compliments. Every night, Cara returned to her tiny house, tired and happy, to cook a small meal for herself. She often brought her chair outside to sit and watch the stars, listening to the insects chirp. She missed Gunnar, even though he was only a few hundred yards away in his house. I think I love him, she murmured to herself in Quapaw. No. I know I love him. But does he love me? She knew he liked her, she could tell that much. But did he love her? She did not know. I have time to find out, though. He's not going anywhere. Well over a week since she moved into the tiny house, Cara wore her now very tattered gown to wash both his clothes and her own in Gunnar's house. Gunnar rode out to inspect his fence line before putting some of the horses out on pasture. She did not expect him back for a while and thought it the perfect opportunity to wash clothes and maybe clean his house for him. So when she heard voices on the porch, she froze, concerned. I haven't had much chance to get into town, she heard Gunnar say. Cara relaxed, continuing to scrub the clothes against the washboard. Gunnar must have ridden back upon seeing he had a visitor. I was just ridin' back this way when that there telegraph feller done asked me to bring this to ye. Well, thank you kindly, Jeb. Silence fell between the two men on the porch, and curiosity grew in Cara. What did the man bring him? What do it say? The stranger asked. Gunnar began, my, bride is coming soon. Bride? What bride? Cara asked herself the same question, her blood running cold in her veins. She ceased washing the clothes, and listened intently. I ordered a mail-order bride a while ago, she heard Gunnar reply. She'll be here by week's end. Don't that beat all? Find yourself a bride in the mail. How the world be changin', . Yeah. I guess. Thanks again for bringing this by, Jeb. Glad to, Gunnar. Invite me to the wedding. I will. Cara felt her heart shatter. Gunnar didn't love her, couldn't possibly love her. He had a woman on her way to marry him. Her breath cut off, she couldn't breathe. Staring down at the laundry, she couldn't even cry. He doesn't love me, he doesn't love me, he doesn't love me. Unable to get the refrain out of her mind, she waited to hear his boots in the house, hear him call her name. Cara didn't know what she would or could say to him if he did. But he didn't come into the house, as he must have had some work still to do. She could not stay here any longer. On feet she couldn't feel, her body and emotions numb, she left the clothes to sit in the soapy water, and left the house by the back door. Heading for her own tiny house, she realized that when his wife came and found her living there, she would be kicked out immediately. It is better to leave on my own than suffer being thrown out. In a gunny sack, she packed as much food as she could carry, the salt, the sugar, the meat, the potatoes and onions. It was heavy after she finished, but she knew if she slung it on her back, she could carry it more easily. She also took the box of matches, liking how easily they worked, her knife, her new bow, and the half-finished bundle of arrows. Hesitating, she gazed at the ribbons hanging on a peg, wondering if she should take them. His gift. Tears falling, Cara wept as she left them where they were and departed her tiny home. Hampered as she was by her burden, she could not run up the hills toward the forest. Between her heartbroken sobs and the weight of her burdens, her lungs burned by the time she reached the trees. Setting the sack down, she wiped her face with her hands, and glanced back. The day had waned toward late afternoon, and Gunnar rode back to the house. A tiny figure on horseback, she saw him dismount, then go into the house. Now he would know she had run away. Cara wished she had not gotten involved at all with him. She should never have trusted a white man, should never have accepted his invitation to live on his property or help him with his horses. Had she remained in the hills as she originally planned to do, her heart would not now be filled with grief. Picking up her burden once more, Cara ducked into the trees. Chapter 12. Cara. After not finding her outside with the horses, Gunnar suspected she was in the house, cleaning it. Don't tell me my house is dirty again. He walked through the house, finding everything as he had left it that morning, his socks on the floor and his whiskey glass still on the table. Heading toward the kitchen, he discovered the wash tub full of water and clothes soaking inside. Dread filled his heart. Oh, no. Miss Cara? Rushing out the back door and down the steps, Gunnar ran past the barn to her house, fearing what he would find. The door hung wide open, the meat and sacks of vegetables that had hung on the walls gone. As were her bow and arrows. Yet, the ribbons still hung on their pegs. Gunnar felt his world crash at his feet. She's gone. He loved her. He knew that. He had fallen for her as they worked together with the horses, knew she was his perfect life partner, the only one he wanted to love, Cara. Gunnar swore under his breath as he ran out of the shed and gazed up at the hills and the forest there. She overheard me, he muttered to himself. She was in the house, she heard me and Jeb talking about my bride. She heard, and she bolted. Despite knowing it was useless, Gunnar cupped his hands around his mouth and shouted toward the hills. Miss Cara. Cara. Come back. Running his hands through his hair, slapping his hat against his thigh, Gunnar gazed at the ground. Her tracks. He followed them for several yards, then glanced at the sky. The sun would set in a few hours. He would never find her before dark. I better wait until morning. Grief and pain etched their way into his heart as he went back to the house and took his horse into the barn. After he unsaddled and put the horse in the stall, Gunnar fed him and the others, working automatically, hardly knowing what he was doing. He already missed Cara terribly, cursing himself for not telling her how he felt, for not wiring the bride back east to tell her he was no longer interested. But if I can find Cara, he said to himself as he threw feed to the horses, I can tell her how I feel. She'll come back. Surely, she will return with me. I can wire the woman, tell her to forget it. Yes, it can work out. I know it can. Despite his confident words, he hardly slept that night, tossing and turning on his bed. Visions of Cara torn to pieces by a mountain lion or wolves continually crept into his imagination. He wondered how she was doing up there. Did she have shelter? Dang, she didn't take the blanket. Was she comfortable? Is she thinking of me? By dawn, Gunnar woke from a troubled sleep and a nightmare of finding Cara's dead body, torn and bloody. He groaned as he sat up, rubbing his gritty eyes. Time to go find her. He ate a hasty breakfast of bread and meat, then headed to the corrals and the barn to feed the stock. He saddled his gelding, mounted, and found Cara's tracks again at the edge of the field. Riding slowly, he followed the faint impressions of her feet, but the green grass sprang back up overnight, making it difficult. When he found gunny sack threads on a tree branch, Gunnar knew he was on her trail. Once under the tree line, he still found it difficult to find her footprints, but found enough here and there in the dirt to know she had come this way. Higher and higher she had climbed the previous day. Gunnar bent over his horse's shoulder to closely watch the ground. He discovered a small stream where she knelt to get a drink of water, and suspected she might remain nearby. Dismounting, he tied the gelding to a tree, then followed her tracks on foot. Within a few hundred yards, he came upon freshly cut pine branches piled over the opening of a small cave in a rocky outcropping. Miss Cara? It's me. It's Gunnar. He received no answer. Hoping she wasn't planning to shoot him with her new bow, he ducked inside the cave. He found the remains of a fire, still smoking, her sack of food, and a pallet of pine needles. But no Cara. Her bow and arrows were also gone. Did she hear me coming and run? If she did, she would not come back while he was there. He left the cave and stood outside, wondering what to do. Cara, he yelled. Come home. I don't want to marry that other girl. I want to marry you. Do you hear me? I want to marry you. Once again, only the whisper of the wind in the trees and a chattering squirrel answered him. If Cara heard him, he knew she might not believe him. After all, what did he give her to believe in? Gazing around at the steep hill above that led higher into the hills, he tried once more. Cara. I love you. Come home. Please. Hoping against hope that she heard him and would return, Gunnar walked back to his horse. Letting the gelding have a drink from the creek, he mounted up and turned his horse downhill. A sense of urgency filled him. He had to get to Sweetwater and the telegraph office. He had to cancel the marriage before the other woman, he forgot her name, boarded her train. Was he in time? Trotting down the side of the hill, he hit a gallop once he reached level ground. Reining in his sweaty gelding at the telegraph office, Gunnar dismounted and tied him to the rail. Hurrying inside, he quickly dictated a message for the station master to send. Do not come. Marriage is off. He paid the master his fee, then asked him, will I hear a reply? The master shrugged, adjusting his spectacles on his nose. Don't know. You might check back in a while, however, just in case. Needing to cool his hot horse, Gunnar led him down the street toward the blacksmith's shop, his gut tight with anxiety. If his bride did not receive his message in time and boarded the train, she would arrive in Sweetwater within a few days. What will I say to her? I'm sorry, I fell in love before you got here. I don't want to marry you anymore. I want to marry a wild girl raised by Indians who is now living in a cave. Gunnar rolled his eyes when he pictured that scene in his mind, and he imagined the woman's outrage. The gelding now cool enough to leave alone for a while, Gunnar tied him to the rail outside Anson's huge converted barn and walked inside. Anson, backlit by his forges, glanced up from his work shoeing a pair of horses. The owner of the animals wasn't in evidence as Gunnar pulled up a stool. Anson put his hammer down. What's wrong? Cara ran off. Go on. Gunnar quickly told him what happened, and how he found where she chose to live in the wild. I'm afraid she won't listen to me, Anson. She won't come to me so I can explain that I don't want to marry this other woman. So you love Cara, then? I do. Gunnar slapped his hat against his knees in worry and frustration. So what do I do? First, make sure this other woman doesn't get on the train to Sweetwater, Anson replied easily. And then? Wait. For what? For Cara to come back. Gunnar rose from the stool and paced. But she might not ever come back. Didn't you hear me when I said I don't think she will listen? Oh, I heard you. I didn't say you should stop trying to get her to talk. Keep going to her cave and keep reminding her that you aren't marrying this other girl. She will soon believe you and come home. All right. Gunnar walked his horse back to the telegraph station, hoping his message got through in time. But when he gazed down at the message he'd already received while talking to Anson, his stomach fell into his boots. Lady already on her way. Chapter 13. Cara's shoulders wanted to tremble as she froze, hidden in a thicket, her bow drawn and an arrow nocked. She dared not move a muscle until she was sure the fat buck in her sights had ambled in close enough. She wanted him broadside to her for a clean shot through either the lungs or the heart, a swift kill. Ah, yes, very good. One more step. She relaxed her fingers. The arrow flew from her bow and struck the deer behind the shoulder. It leapt and bolted, crashing through the trees in panic. Cara ran after him, her quiver of arrows bumping against her hip as she gave chase. She didn't have to run far. The buck lay silent and dead, amid the brush and dead leaves, her arrow sticking up from his side. Cara whooped in the quapaw war cry, then pulled her knife from its sheath at her belt. Kneeling beside the carcass, she said a prayer of thanks to the buck's spirit, then cut its throat to bleed it out, and gutted it. After tossing the parts she did not want to keep into the brush for the foxes to find and devour, she put the heart and liver back into its open cavity. She then tied the rope she'd braided from hemp around its neck. She had more than a mile to drag the carcass to her camp, and then work in skinning it once she got there. Dragging the thing was hard work, but she was young and strong, and she returned to her cave about an hour later. Tying the rope around her deer's rear hooves, Cara tossed the end of the rope over a branch and hauled it up. After tying it off, she sang under her breath as she skinned her kill. In the days since she ran away from Gunnar and his coming bride, she grieved for him. Many nights she cried herself to sleep beside her fire, wanting to be back at his ranch, working the horses, hearing his praise and seeing his smile. Tears filled her eyes as she worked, for she sang an old quapaw love song, but she blinked them away. She could not risk cutting herself if she was blinded by her tears. Gunnar didn't love her anyway, she told herself, despite the fact that he visited her cave while she was gone. She had returned and seen his tracks, smelled his unique odor over the smell of wood smoke. Why he had come, she didn't know, but he had not returned. Perhaps he came to say goodbye. After cutting a chunk of haunch for her supper to roast along with the heart and liver, Cara lifted the deer higher in the tree to protect it from predators, and retied the rope. Entering her cave, she built up her fire, and set her meal to cooking, then fetched the hide to begin curing it. She had hardly begun when she heard footsteps outside her cave. Cocking her head, she listened. 2 feet, not 4. Miss Cara? The voice was not Gunnar's, and unfamiliar. She knocked another arrow to her bow, waiting to see what he would do. Whoever he was, he knew her name, knew she was inside. Who is he and what does he want with me? The steps drew closer, and when he spoke again, she knew he was right outside her cave's entrance. Miss Cara, my name is Anson Holt, and I work as a blacksmith in Sweetwater. I came to speak with you if I may. She nibbled her lip, wondering what to do. Surely he did not come to do her harm, or he wouldn't have announced himself. Although she was armed, he might be also. Deciding that speaking to him would probably be the quickest way to get him to leave, Cara, her arrow still knocked to the bowstring, ducked low and left her cave. She came face to face with the biggest man she had ever seen. She stared first at his belly, then raised her eyes to his massive chest and finally up to his pleasant, good-natured face and smile. "Thank you, Miss Cara," he said. "I was hoping I wouldn't be forced to come in there after you. A pleasure to meet you at last." He stuck out a huge hand. Fearing he might crush it, Cara tentatively gave him hers. He gripped it lightly, then dropped it. "May I sit?" he asked, gesturing toward the ground. "As I said, I want to talk to you. I would not want you to strain your neck to look up at me." Cara nodded and watched as he folded his legs and sat, a graceful move she had no idea a man his size could generate. She sat as well, crossing her legs and setting her bow on her knees. With a gesture, she invited him to speak. Anson Holt dipped his chin in a gracious nod. "I am a friend of Gunnar Krick's," he began. "That is how I knew where you were." Though Cara didn't move or alter her expression, the man held up his hand as though to forestall a comment. "Now I have no right to get between you. What is between you is your business and his. I have come at the behest of my wife, as well as to ask you to help me handle some difficult horses I need to shoe. Gunnar told me how well you charm wild horses, and I believe you are just the person to help me." "Curious now," Cara asked, "how bad?" Anson Holt made a face. "Bad enough. The last time I had to shoe them, I got kicked and it nearly put me out of work for a month. I can't afford that. Now, I'm willing to pay you. But my wife has gone crazy after hearing about you living up here, all alone, with who knows what wild animals are ready to have you for a snack." Cara shrugged. "Yes, well, you have to know my wife. She is dead set on having you stay with us. So, will you come back to Sweetwater with me?" Gesturing toward the hanging deer in her cave, Cara said, "My home." "One good thing about it," Anson Holt said agreeably, "if things don't work out, you can always come back. Now I have 2 horses at the creek. We can throw yonder buck over the hind end of the one you ride, along with all your things. I have room enough for you and him both, and I sure have a hankering for some venison." By the time he finished speaking, she had made up her mind. She was lonely. She hated to think it, but she missed people. If she spent the winter up there, it would only get worse. She could be snowed in, not able to move about freely for weeks at a time. No one to know or care whether she was alive or dead. Nodding, she said, "I go." "Good," he said, rising gracefully to his feet and extending his hand down to her. "If I went home without you, my wife would skin me faster than you did that boy there." As Cara returned inside her cave to put her fire out, put her meat in the gunny sack and roll up the buck's hide, Anson went to get the horses. He cut the buck's carcass down and tied it behind the saddle of one horse, then took her sack and tied it to the saddle horn. Before she could mount, Anson picked her up with his massive hands around her waist, and set her gently in the saddle. "I know you could have done it yourself," he said, mounting the other, "but I'm a gentleman, and my wife would kill me if I did anything less." Chapter 14. The day his bride was to arrive dawned, and Gunnar lay in bed feeling sick. A sickness of the soul more than one of the body. He hadn't slept well at all since Cara ran away, and he had worked himself into exhaustion. Now he felt ill with dread, knowing he had to face his intended bride and say what? "Sorry to bring you all this way, but I won't marry you." He had hoped to have worked things out with Cara before this, but he hadn't. The 3 other times he'd gone up to find her, she'd been gone. Only the day before, he'd gone to her cave to talk to her. What he found confused him. Dried blood on the ground by a tree, the remains of a hand-braided rope hanging nearby. Her fire killed with dirt, more blood inside the cave and no Cara. Her possessions were gone as well. What did this mean? Walking around, he found shod hoofprints. If he had to guess, he thought someone came to get her and take her away. But who? Giving up, he rode home and pondered it some more. Yet, that was his only conclusion. Someone came and she went with the person willingly. It had to be someone she knew. Thomas and Mary Fitzgerald? She might trust them enough to go with them, but how did they know where to find her? After he dealt with his bride, he would ask around the town, starting with the mayor and his wife. Finally rising from his bed, Gunnar dressed and shaved, ate some cold breakfast, then fed the stock. His mind and body numb, he saddled his horse and headed for town. The train was due in at 11, which gave him plenty of time to get to Sweetwater and wait. He wanted to arrive early in case the train did. The very last thing he wanted was to miss her and have her wandering around town asking about him. Still fretting over what to say to her, Gunnar thought it would be best if he paid for a return ticket for her. Yet, the cost would deplete what little he had managed to save. He told himself he had no choice and would recoup the cost in the sales of the colts and the filly. The black and white pinto would fetch twice as much as the others. Tying his gelding to the rail by the train station, he sat down on one of the benches. Arriving more than an hour early, Gunnar fretted with impatience. He never was very good with sitting around, and his nervous agitation didn't help. He was only 30 minutes into his wait when he heard the train's whistle. Rising, he paced around as people from the town hurried toward the station. Even if they weren't waiting for anyone, the mail came by train and most everyone wanted to be here for that. A small crowd gathered on the platform as the plume of steam and smoke appeared over the hills. Gunnar, taller than most, stood toward the back, watching it pull in. I will just have to buy her a ticket home. No other option. With another piercing whistle and the scrape of metal on metal, the huge machine braked to a halt. Porters jumped down to grab baggage and to help the passengers down. The conductor also leapt to the platform, pulled out his watch and glanced at it. Gunnar watched the disembarking passengers, but none was a single lady. Most were men, in fact. When it became clear that there was no one else getting off and others were already climbing on, Gunnar went to one of the porters. Excuse me, but isn't there a lady due to get off the train here in Sweetwater? No, sir, he replied. Not as far as I know. He went to another and asked the same question. This fellow frowned. There was a little gal who got off the train a long way back. Seems she got a message from her man saying the wedding is off. Relief spread through Gunnar and he faltered. Really? Yes, sir. Right annoyed about it, she was. Her man is darn lucky she turned back, if you ask me. Why do you say that? She may be a lady and all, but she weren't nice, not at all, sir. Meaner than a snake with a bad tooth, she was. I was right glad to see her go back, I was. As though a huge weight fell from his shoulders, Gunnar laughed. I expect you may be right in that, my good friend. Thank you for your information. Was you her man? Gunnar nodded. I found someone else. Good for you, the porter said, offering him a gap-toothed grin. Right lucky you is. I know I am. Taking quick strides, Gunnar went to his horse and mounted up. Riding through town, he wondered how he got so lucky as to find the woman of his dreams, and narrowly escape marriage to a mean-tempered woman he'd never met. Now if I can just find Cara and ask her to marry me, I'll be the happiest man in the world. Or will be, if she says yes. Riding past Anson's blacksmith shop on his way to find the mayor, Gunnar heard something unusual. Music, it sounded like. Reining in, he listened more closely. Not music, he realized. Singing. And he knew exactly who it was who sang. His heart hammering in his chest, he dismounted, and, with shaking hands, tied his horse to the hitching rail. He walked into the big shop with its forges burning, sweat popping immediately over his brow. He caught sight of Sarah, who saw him at the same instant. She put her finger to her mouth in a shushing gesture, then cut her finger over her throat. Do not say anything. Gunnar nodded, then edged his way closer. What he saw astounded him. Cara held the head of a huge black stallion, singing to him, as Anson held the massive hoof between his knees, hammering a nail to it. She smiled, though she did not break off her singing. Only then did he notice that all her attention was on the horse. Knowing her skill with calming horses, he now understood it was Anson who went to the cave to find her. After all, Gunnar himself told Anson where she was. With Sarah gesturing to him, he edged his way toward her, making no sudden moves. If Anson felt the urgent need to go find Cara in the hills, this stud had to be a dangerous one. Standing beside Sarah, Gunnar watched the drama unfold as Sarah murmured in his ear. "She has that beast charmed," she whispered. "Anson can't shoe him without almost getting killed. Look at him. Like a purring kitten with Cara." Gunnar nodded slowly. "She has the gift." "I'll say she does." The two stood without speaking further as Anson, his concentration on the stallion just as intense as Cara's, moved about the big horse, picking up his hooves and hammering shoes onto them. The black swished his tail now and then, but if Gunnar didn't know better, he'd say the beast was as docile as his own gelding. Sweat ran freely down Anson's face as he finished, and never in all the years he'd known the man, had he ever sweated inside his own shop. Anson stepped carefully away from the stallion. "I'm done now." Cara stopped singing and caressed the big black face, smiling, then bent to kiss him. She murmured something in Quapaw, then took the horse's rope. Turning him, Gunnar saw her head barely reach the stallion's massive shoulder, but he walked beside her with the same tranquility as he stood while getting shoes hammered to his feet. Anson drew in a deep breath as she took the horse out of the big barn, and then turned to the two of them. "I almost can't believe my own eyes," Anson said, watching her go and wiping the sweat from his face. "I charged that owner triple because of how mean that beast can get, and now I feel I should return some of his money. That girl is a walking miracle." "No, you won't," Sarah said. "You earned every penny just in the iron for the shoes. Plus, you should pay Cara with some of it, for without her you might have gotten badly hurt." "And that's the second one," Anson told Gunnar. "The first had been just as mean in the past, and with your lady there, he was just as mild as an old cow. I still can't believe how easy it was to shoe them with her here, singing. Singing to them, of all things." Pride in Cara surged with Gunnar. "I told you how good she is with horses." Gunnar. Turning, he found Cara standing there, a look of shock on her face. "What you do here?" "I came to find you." Forgetting that he spoke in front of witnesses, Gunnar took a few steps toward her. "I am so sorry you heard what you did, Cara, about that bride," he said. "Once I met you, I had no intention of marrying the other woman. I sent her a message telling her I did not want to marry her. I want to marry you." Dropping to his knee, Gunnar took her hands in his, gazing up into her beautiful, honey-colored eyes. His gut clenched in nervousness, but he went on. "Will you marry me, Cara?" For a long moment, she stared down at him, disbelief crossing her features. He wondered if she truly understood what he meant, or if she was trying to find a gentle way to say no. Tears slipped down her cheeks as a tremulous smile quivered on her lips. "Yes, Gunnar," she said. "Yes, I will marry you." He stood and scooped her up in his arms. He twirled around with her, her skirts flying. She said yes, he cried to both Anson and Sarah. She said yes. They chuckled together. "We heard her," Anson said. "Now, put her down," Sarah instructed with a huge smile. "And come on to the house. I'll fix us all some supper." Gunnar put Cara down, but he couldn't take his eyes from her face. Finally, she tugged on his arm. "Come," she said. "I am hungry." The end. Thank you for listening to this heartwarming story by Susannah Calloway. You can be assured that all her books are clean and wholesome. To find other romances by Susannah Calloway, as well as the other authors at Tika House Publishing, visit www.tikahousepublishing.com. Remember to hit like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next Susannah Calloway Western romance.